Good morning, class. I'd like to welcome you to our 2n1 Ministries. We love each one of you, and we are thrilled that each one of you has chosen to join us for this very important discussion today. We are very humbled that we have people from countries from all over the world right now that are praying for our nation, that are praying for our president, for his protection, and for, hopefully, his success in this November 3rd election coming up here in just a few days. First of all, I hope that all of you will take the time to go vote. After all, you might wait in line maybe 1, 2, or 3 hours, but we need to remember that we have our forefathers and even our current military that have laid down their lives, their blood for our freedoms. And so the little bit of time that we spend to go to vote is worth every single minute. And secondly, we are wanting to encourage you to vote biblically. So our teacher, Todd Frederick, is going to unfold some good character qualities of the man that would be the best to fill this position. And I hope you jump on board with us and that you're excited about looking up the scripture with us and studying the best character for this awesome and very important position, the next leader of the United States of America. So thank you, Todd Frederick, for joining us, and we'll look forward to hearing what God has put on your heart.
Okay. Well, this is a good time that we're in, living in America, having the freedoms that we've got to vote, and we have an election coming up in like a couple of weeks. And our point that we made a couple of weeks ago, we felt like we needed to elaborate a little bit on it, and we talked about the platform that each party stands on, and why we should vote for Trump versus Biden. And what we are doing is basically voting on an ideology and not so much a person or personality and that type of thing. We wanted to touch on the issue of Trump, as well as also dovetailing into that our South Carolina Senate, U.S. Senate seat, Lindsey Graham. He's running against the Jamie Harrison candidate for the Democrats. And so there again, you got two opposing sides, and you have to ask yourself, which side will God stand on? God of the universe. He says, Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. So if you look at each party and what they stand for, which one is more adhering to God's commandments? And then you have to ask yourself, the party, we always hear people say, God bless America. Well, which party would God bless America more? Would America be blessed more by God by adhering to Democratic principles or Republican principles? Based on which ones are adhering to God's commandments more closely. But we look at Trump, for example. Donald Trump came out as being the more pro-family candidate than, of course, Biden. Pro-family has been God's heart since the beginning in Genesis. He said, let us make man in our image, and then he made man a helpmeet, which is a woman. Opposite sex. Then God made marriage. So that the ideal stand to be with, and God's heartbeat for that is to be pro-family. If you got a pro-anything candidate like the Democrats have, then you could be pro-homosexual and whatever blend you want to come up with. So that's a reason why you should vote for Trump. And also with Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, he's pro-family. Jamie Harrison's not. Um, the children, you got to think of that. How is it that the next generation is going to be able to be raised for living and loving the Lord, serving Him, and having the faith to be passed on to their children? If you have children being brought into a homosexual environment, they have two mommies or two daddies or something like that. So it's obviously God is not going to be in that family, because He said in numerous places around in the scriptures, like Paul said that such were some of you, and he mentioned about the effeminate and so forth. And in Romans chapter 1 you'll see that, where God said that those who turned from the truth, He turned them over to reprobate mind. Men working with men, that which is unseemly, and so forth. So obviously children in that environment are not going to be raised up loving and desiring salvation and like that, loving God. And they talk about love. Ran into some homosexuals here recently in Asheville, some lesbians, and they talk about love. Well, we're neither homosexual or heterosexual. We believe in love. But love is when you do what God says. Because He says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. So that's point number one. And point number two would be that Trump has turned out to be a very good pro-life president. Before, when he was not running for president, he was a Democrat. And everybody loves, who hates him now, loved him then. He was a Democrat, supported Democrat candidates like Schumer and Clinton and Hillary and all like that when she ran for Senate. So he's kind of not certain as to whether he's pro-life in truth, because then you think, well, what if he says he is and he's not? Not like Jamie Harrison. He's for God and faith and helping the poor people and like that. But sounds good, but you don't need to take the risk to trade out who we know is good. Like in Lindsey Graham's case, we know what he stood for. He's not always been the best. Like he's worked with Chuck Schumer and trying to do, with the Gang of Eight, trying to do amnesty for the immigrants, but I think he's come around and seen that that wasn't a good idea. But we know that Jamie Harrison is with the Democrat platform, and he is for giving citizenship to illegals. So that's not what we need. So, but to speak back about pro-life, Trump has proved to be pro-life. He's said, and he sees that that's the backbone of any country. You can't kill your own people and expect your nation to prosper. So we see that in Deuteronomy 30:19.
It says, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. I just wanted to comment really quickly. I'm thankful that Trump has been probably the most pro-life president that we've ever had. And he even made that a very definitive point from the beginning of his presidency.
Yeah, I mean, who can, except for people who are deceived by Satan, how can someone be okay with fighting, the babies fighting against the doctor's instruments to come in to cut it up and to dismember it? A video was shown of that a baby was pushing against the instrument coming in to try to take it and pull it out to dismember it. How can anybody be for that? There are those. They have justifications, and it's just a tissue. And it's a woman's right. What about the baby? If it's in there, it's a female. Doesn't that female have a right? I guess not, according to Jamie Harrison. But the thing is, if you're for a baby being able to be cut out of its mother's womb and sold for body parts, I mean, then who's the Hitler? Didn't he have that? Didn't Hitler have doctors that were experimenting with various people, little children that were like twins, for example? He'd take a set of twins, his doctors, and do experiments on them and all kind of evil stuff. Well, I mean, we're becoming extermination of cattle, just about. And you take somebody and cut them up, and you put them into somebody else's body. I mean, it's one thing to, when you die, you want to donate your body parts, but, you know, I don't see a consent there in the baby saying, yes, cut me up and, you know, help some other people. Also in Luke 17:2, we find that Jesus had these stern words for people who come against babies, young people.
It says, "It were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and he cast into the sea, than that he should offend one of these little ones." So I don't see how anybody who says they are Christian can vote for a Democrat, because they are very adamant about killing babies. Biden and Harris are definitely having bloody hands.
Yeah, it's almost like having scales on their eyes, like the way Saul was when he was before he became Paul. He was serving the agenda of the Pharisees, going out, arresting Christians, putting them up in jails and killing many of them and stuff. And then when he met Christ along the way, it's like scales fell off his eyes. He was able to see what he was actually doing. And I see that has to be the case with people who were in the Democrat camp. I mean, for example, I had a black customer the other day, a lady who was a pastor's wife. They were married for 61 years, and she said her husband's been now passed away for 7 years. Her husband was a pastor. So anyway, when I pulled up into the yard, I see a Biden-Harris sign out there. So when I went inside, of course I had my pin on. I was thinking, hopefully it doesn't offend her or anything like that. But we had a good talk. And she actually said that she was benefited by this trucker that dropped off a huge tractor-trailer load of food boxes at a church here in Greenville. And in the box was a letter saying that, from President Trump, that he's been able to distribute 50 million meals. And of course they were using the USDA means to take the farmers' foods that they made and, you know, grew and all like that, and send it to the people who needed it. I mean, so of course she couldn't say that Trump was a bad guy, but as we were talking, she had full agreement with what I was talking about, you know, and things that were moral issues, things pertaining to the Bible and all like that. So I think what people are doing is divorcing politics from the Bible, which you can't. You have to have them both the same, because look at the Constitution. It's all embedded together. It's almost like you take and weave together a wicker basket. You can't have them separated and say, well, this isn't a piece of wicker and this, you know. And so when the early founding fathers wove together the fabrics of this nation to become what it was and is, it took the Bible and common sense principles and leadership practices and so on, and intertwined them together. And I can't remember who it was that said that a nation that doesn't adhere to God's principles will deserve to lose its sovereignty. So that's the issue we have at hand. If you divorce the laws from God's law, then you have humanism reigning and ruling, which is actually what Karl Marx, his agenda was, as he was anti-God in his views. So also, President Trump and all of the other Republican candidates, I don't know that aren't, but there's other elections going on throughout the United States for governor, for Senate, and like I said, South Carolina, you got Lindsey Graham, who's running for Senate seat. These are all pro-gun. Second Amendment, able to defend yourself. You might not, you know, what if you don't need your gun for a burglar? You might need it for, like me the other day, there was a snake in the yard, so I had my gun and I shot it. If I would have not had a gun, I would have had to have some other tool, like we talked about before. If like in Australia, they outlawed guns, so what do people use? Robbers come in and they use knives and or scissors, and they kill their victims that way. And in fact, the other day when the radical Muslim in France, who had come to France from asylum, from his former country, he beheaded the teacher with a knife. Not with a gun, but with a knife. So, anyway, the point is, if voting Republican, you'll be able to maintain your Second Amendment rights. We see that in Deuteronomy, or Nehemiah 4:17.
Nehemiah 4:17. They which builded on the wall, and they that bear burdens, with those that laded every one of them, his hands wrought in the work, and with the other hand held a weapon. So they had their tool in one hand and weapon in the other.
Yeah, you have to have protection, especially when you have adversaries, in your land. And that leads us to the next point. For those who, we can't stand watch by our house every day and night, and businesses, and we go on vacation, we can't, do all that stuff for ourselves. We can, have our weapon by our side, but it'd be good to have somebody that's maybe doing surveillance, maybe having a perimeter around the area, make sure that somebody's not coming in with a plan to blow up the place or whatever. That's where the police come in. The police are necessary to maintain law and order. That's why they're called law enforcement officers. And they're for the safety. You'll see that some of them say safety officers on the side of it or something like that, of their car. So you need law enforcement agents, whether they be police or people who do cyber policing. You have people many days that nowadays are being taken into sex trade because they go online and are naive and think that the person they're talking to is, the person that they say they are, and they meet up with them. And so fortunately you have cyber police that oftentimes will catch and intervene in a situation like that and protect the person. But with the Antifa and Black Lives Matters and the Democratic Party, they're for defunding the police, cutting down the amount of monies. Look at the Democrat states right now in the West and in the North and places. The Democrats have voted to defund the police, and some police departments are now totally disbanded. You have a lot of states where the police are so frustrated that they're not needed and they're being maligned and accused and like that they're just quitting. So these Democrat policymakers are so sorry in their budgeting and so forth. They're overtaxing and giving away the farm, so to speak, to all the people who, they say, well, the poor needs this, we need to give them housing, we need to give them food, we need to give them free education. And so who's going to pay for all that stuff? Well, you got to tax the people. So when you tax the people, and then they start coming up short because, like what we're seeing is there's exits going, people are leaving New York and Chicago and California and all these places where the Democrat strongholds are at because they just can't stand the oppression and the taxation and all those things. So they're leaving. So they're leaving these legislators with holding the bag that they created. So now what they're doing is saying, oh, we need to defund the police. They're thinking, hey, this is going to be politically good because we'll be appeasing the Black Lives and the Matter and the Antifa. So what we'll do is we'll appease them and we can slide the money from the police department to help fund these programs that we voted on.
I was just going to reemphasize that point that I have a brother who is moving from Chicago right now as we speak, from that area. He lives right outside of Chicago, and he is moving to another state that is a much safer place.
South Dakota.
Yes, to South Dakota, where they have a much more conservative governor who is also a Christian. And so we see that that's just a case in point there to illustrate what you just said. People are making this grand exodus. There's a feeling of fear, and wherever there's anarchy and wherever there's this demonic control and absence of God, you have people that want to get out of there and fast.
And so we have, the police being drawn down, told them to stand down and all like that. And to tell the police that you stand in your position, don't do anything, and they're letting these rioters go in and burn down buildings and throw projectiles and bombs and fireworks and all like that at the police, and even attacking firemen when they come in, and all this stuff's like, okay, what's the point of that? You got Mayor Wheeler out in Portland. He was all for them and marching down the streets with them, months ago, and it's almost like I was telling Heather, it's almost like these people were like the ones that were at Lot's door, those sodomites that were at Lot's door, and when the angels were inside, and they said, let us in so we may know these people. Lot had appeased these homosexuals while he was living there, and then they turned on him. And that's the way it was with with this Ted Wheeler guy. He's sitting there appeasing the rioters and all like that until finally they turn on him. So you can't trust these people who are anarchists, anti-biblical, anti-constitutional people, because that's the whole point. They're wanting to turn this thing totally upside down, make it into a whole another Venezuela or North Korea or something like that. And you say, well, how is that so? Well, because they want to do the police and guns. If they can do away with that, then you're sitting there like a dumb sheep, and they'll just come in and slaughter you. The military's one thing that Trump is for, pro-military. If you don't have the military, then you have maybe a crowd that overtakes the police, then you can have the military come in. But did Ted Wheeler want the military to come in, or some of these other Democrat stronghold areas? They said, no, we don't need the National Guard to come in. Why? Because they wanted to make the place look so bad, and they could sit there and point at the the Republican Party and leaders and say, it's all your fault. So we see in Matthew 5:9 the importance of the military. They're considered like a gatekeeper. You stand at the gate, somebody's going to come in, you ask who they are, and so forth. And if there's no gatekeeper, then the enemy just comes right in like a flood.
It says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And then one other verse about the police and the military in Isaiah 54, and that is in verse 17. I'll just read the first part of the verse. No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper.
Yeah.
No weapon that's formed against thee shall prosper.
So when we have God and His principles and His laws that we're keeping, then He will be our protection, because we will have those standing on His side. But when we stand on the side of Satan, He's not going to protect us. Jesus said He's come to kill, steal, and destroy. Satan has. But Jesus said, I have come to give life and life more abundantly. So when we keep His principles, we'll also be wanting to be for Israel. Those people probably says, well, I don't like the Jews because they killed Jesus. Well, they killed him, but so did you. So did I. Our sins were laid upon Him, and our iniquities of us all was placed upon Christ. And so it's by His blood that was shed. It was not because of His, it was because of us. If we were there, then we would have been saying stone him, or we would have been saying hang him. We would have been saying rid this man out of our city. And we've been doing all the things that they did. So, but we got to look at Israel and say, okay, God said a particular promise in Genesis 12:3 pertaining to Abraham and his seed.
It says, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed.
And you got these, the four horsemen, or whichever one you call them, the Ocasio-Cortez and the other radicals like her, they are not for Israel. And why a Democrat would vote for why an Israeli American would vote for a Democrat is beyond me. Why would they want to vote for Biden when Trump has done so much for them? So Trump is for law and order, as we mentioned, but in Proverbs 14:12 we hear Solomon give us this word of wisdom through the Holy Spirit. See, law and order is embedded in the Constitution. It's not like we're voting for a government when we're voting for a candidate. We're voting for a person who's going to stand on the Constitution.
Okay, and also, okay, so let's see, it's 14:12 in Proverbs. It says, "There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death."
Yeah. So if you have a man that's not standing for the Constitution, he's going to be thinking of a way that maybe he thinks is right. But anytime you start to do something new, then it's not true. And if it's true, then it's not new. So the best thing to do is figure that, okay, we've got a Constitution that's been around since, 1776? And they signed it and all that. And of course they've amended it here and there, and some of the things they didn't think about back then, but they certainly don't need to amend it for the things that they're for now. But we see also a verse that we missed about keeping promises. Now Trump says he's made promises and he's kept them. So let's see what Numbers 30 verse 2 says.
It says, "If a man vow a vow unto the Lord," that's a promise, "or swear an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceedeth out of his mouth."
Yeah, so if you've got a leader that says, "I'm going to do this for you," and he doesn't do it, then he's not good because he didn't keep his word. You have to be a man of your word or woman of your word. And speaking of the word, in Proverbs or Ecclesiastes 9:18, it says, "Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroyeth much good." So people say, well, I ask them, I say, "Have you voted yet?" Because we could vote early, and they say, "Well, I don't really get into voting." But the problem is, if you don't vote, then you're allowing that one vote to not be there to cancel out the other vote that somebody's doing to put in a liberal. And so that liberal is going to be that one here, but one sinner destroyeth much good. Either that could mean like your one vote that you didn't do to offset the vote of this liberal candidate voter, then that one person not voting is going to do much bad. But also the one evil character, like if Jamie Harrison gets in, then it says, "But one sinner destroyeth much good." Jamie Harrison's going to go to the U.S. Senate if he gets elected, and he's going to destroy much good. So keep that in mind. You want to have another Chuck Schumer, then vote for Jamie Harrison. Or another Nancy Pelosi version. And to finish this up, we got Ecclesiastes 8:1. Speaking about justice reform, that's one of Jamie Harrison's most platform pieces he's talking on. But I say that what the Scripture speaks about justice reform, it says, because sentence against an evil work is not speedily executed, therefore the hearts of the Son of Man is fully set in them to do evil. So if you don't deal with a person speedily, justice will not be carried out, and therefore to have justice reform, truly, we need to stop having these people be put in life imprisonment and just execute them. And then lastly, real quick, is that Proverbs 29:2. "When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn." So, do you want to have people rejoicing or people mourning? You want to have the unborn mourning or rejoicing? So keep that in mind when you vote this November 3rd or before. You vote Republican, Trump.